Good afternoon and welcome to Harlem Sculpture Gardens. This is your host, Savannah Bailey McLean, and we are very pleased to have in the studio the artist Sherwin Banfield. So welcome, Sherwin.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Savannah.
You're welcome. And we brought you in the studio so that you could talk about your artistic practice, but also a project that you're trying to develop
Yes.
for Harlem Sculpture Gardens. So I know you're based in Brooklyn now. Oh, that's right. You're a Queens resident. This is even better.
Yeah.
So you're a Queens resident. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your artistic practice?
Yes, Queens. I represent Queens, but my wife was raised in Brooklyn, though.
Okay.
A little line for you. So my artistic practice has evolved from study to really honing in on who I am and what helped develop me as an artist. And a lot of that is when I look back into myself and what influenced me. A lot of that was really music.
Okay.
Right? And music really helped to guide me through various stages in my life. And I just thought it was fitting to incorporate that into my art and have the medium of sculpture, the discipline of sculpture, integrate music as a thing to experience.
Okay.
Right, and I've been really taking my time to learn about various technologies. You know, I have a technology background, working in tech for quite some time, and I brought some of that to my artistic practice by incorporating sustainable energy, which allows my sculpture to be self-sustaining, to power music that is housed inside of the sculpture that's representative of the actual person or musician that I've made a monument to or statue of.
See, now that's interesting for me because a lot of times people feel that visual artists are just visual, and that's not true. If you're an artist, you're an artist, and most artists are versed in more than one discipline,
Yes, indeed.
and that's good for the artist, but it's also good for the public because that diversity allows you to grow.
Yep.
And allows us to look at what you're doing from different vantage points.
Right.
And but you chose specifically
Yeah,
one particular genre of music, and that was hip hop.
that's right.
So why did you choose just hip hop?
Well, I got to start earlier in my life, right? I am an immigrant from the island of Trinidad and Tobago. So I grew up listening to soca,
Okay.
calypso, reggae, consistently. That's the pride and joy of the culture.
Okay.
Played in my house for carnival season. It's around me. When I immigrated to this country, to kind of find my place, find my footing, yes, there was TV and friends and families that would introduce me to the culture. But when I began listening to hip hop, that's when I got a true understanding of what was happening on the ground level,
Ah.
and not just in my community, which was East Orange, New Jersey, but also what's happening to various peoples in the social construct of this
Because reggae is political.
country. Reggae is very political. But then when I started listening to hip hop, at that time in the 80s, you had acts like Public Enemy, Righteous Teachers, you had, Brand Nubian, and every album had some sort of righteousness to it, right? And it was a learning experience. So that captivated me, that just grasped me. My brother, too. We were just listening to whatever we could on the radio, and these DJs really gave you what's next, what's up and coming. And so it was a shout out to the DJs that really introduced the culture to the masses over the airwaves. And that's how I myself got captivated with hip hop.
Oh, that's interesting. That's fascinating, really, because you brought in this whole Caribbean aspect to the music. And sometimes people don't understand that within the African diaspora, there's all of this richness of Caribbean,
Yep.
West Africa, North Africa, as well as North and South America. And
Yep.
it's like a flow, just like the music. It's a flow.
Completely.
It's not going to be, compartmentalized, excuse me. It's going to be all one, and it's going to flow, and it's going to, just reach people down to their soul. And that is very good, because a lot of people don't realize, just dealing with Harlem Sculpture Garden, the Renaissance, it wasn't just the Southerners who migrated north.
Right.
It was the Caribbeans
Right.
who came across Jamaica, Trinidad, Cuba, Puerto Rico, because of the hurricanes that was going on. And all of these people started to come, and they started mixing and matching their lifestyles together, and made
Amazing
it,
thing.
and made it very interesting. So you're telling me that still continued?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because when my first sculpture statue dedicated to hip hop artists had a plethora of influences across the diaspora. I had inspiration from I might butcher this name, the Matuliwan people, or the people of the Abrams Island in the Pacific. And you can find their work or their creations at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the Oceanic section, right?
Wow.
That's the southern part of the, just walk right past the Greeks and go into like the back where you have the sunlit area. And you have these towering structures carved from the breadfruit tree. And there are these acoustic instruments just carved out of the trunk of the breadfruit tree. And they're used as ceremonious objects to communicate over different villages, for ceremonies, as in getting people together, for death, for birth. And that was part of the influence for my first sculptures. If you go to the Met, you'll find 3 of them. It's these sculpted head on top of these long cylindrical bodies. And my first sculptures, which were dedicated to Jam Master Jay, Phife Dawg, and Prodigy, it's a similar setup. It's 3 cylinder type structures with a head on top, a golden head, symbolizing the golden age of hip hop. So, and the music is part of my Caribbean experience with Calypso and Carnival, because during Carnival, there's speakers everywhere, on trucks, on sidewalks, in your home, and they're blasting and pumping this frequency of sound into you.
Wow.
Right? And my structures were speaker-housed structures. So I'm reintroducing that to the community in my sculptures. You have these specific people, then you have, which were very melanated people. Then you had, my Caribbean influence. And then you have this mixing with hip hop, which is what I experienced as an immigrant kid trying to assimilate into this culture.
Wow. That was really interesting. I see this Caribbean influence. Let's show some of your works. You've done some great pieces, so we're going to take a look. And your first work is a tribute to LL Cool J. So tell me, what made you wanted to, show off LL Cool J?
Well, other than him just being like this icon, right? And the LL Cool J story is a very interesting one. It's a very organic life introduction with a flow, right?
Okay.
Like you mentioned, that flow. So when the 3 sculptures I mentioned earlier, which is called A Cipher in Queens, when they were first exhibited in Socrates Sculpture Park, Mr. Ralph McDaniels of Video Music Box, who I grew up watching and listening to and introduced me to hip-hop, he saw those sculptures.
Oh, wow.
He was putting on a park jam in Socrates Sculpture Park.
Okay.
And he saw them. He was like, we got to get these to the library. He's the hip-hop coordinator for Queens Public Library.
Oh.
And so after it's run at Socrates Park, it went to Queens Public Library. And I get to LL in a minute. So as it's there, I'm meeting new people. I'm meeting people in Jamaica, Queens.
Okay.
I'm meeting DJs that helps creative hip hop in Queens. I'm meeting DJ Divine of Infinity Sounds. I'm meeting the Disco Twins, the Albino Twins. I'm meeting all these interesting pioneers of hip hop. And I'm meeting friends of superstars, right? Even met Jam Master Jay's son on Five Dogs' mom.
Wow.
Right? And I met an individual who grew up with LL Cool J. His name is Darryl Pringle. He's also an artist, right? Sometimes it takes another set of eyes or another experience to understand what you're doing as an artist. And since he himself is an artist, he worked at Def Jam. He saw what I was doing, and he said, hey, man, I got to meet you. So I met him at O'Connell Park in St. Albans, Queens, and he's like, you got to do one of Todd. I'm like, huh? Wow. He's like, Todd Smith, LL. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I was considering doing others because I have a whole list of people I want to do, of artists. But he said, LL, I think you should get one. He has a jump ball tournament that happens in this park every year that he sponsors. You should come, check it out when he's here. And, I mean, he didn't have to say much more because I idolized LL when I was growing up, when I was that young kid coming off the island and seeing, the style, the Kangol, the change, the bravado, the swag, all that. That was like a vision. That's
and
incredible.
I can see the Caribbean connection because if you know anything about the Caribbean men do have that sort of, bravado, that swag that's very unique and distinct.
Yeah.
And so I could see the similarities and how the two might admire each other for that. Not a competition, but, I see you.
Yeah. And I was watching, the Finding Your Roots with...
yes, with Henry Louis
with
Gates.
Dr. Hugh Jr., and he had LL on, and he was showing LL that, yes, you have this Caribbean lineage in your background. And I was like, oh, look at that.
Well, see, most people don't know. When those Africans were coming across that Atlantic, most stopped in the Caribbean first. The ones who were more docile went to the Americas. The ones who were fierce, they didn't know what to do with them.
Right.
And so they ended up staying there.
Yep.
That's why I have a lot of respect for the Jamaicans, because the Jamaicans said that if we have to die, we're going to die with every man, woman, and child. So they were fierce.
They were.
Against both the Spaniards and the British.
Yeah.
And people tend to think that the Africans who came across, they just let slavery happen to them, that they didn't fight back.
Right.
Oh, they fought back.
Yeah.
We now have been able to document at least 250 slave revolts. Okay, they fought back.
Yep.
And so, yes, I'm seeing this. Even when you think about battling with rappers, it's the same thing. You're battling for what?
Yeah.
Your identity, your place in the world. So I'm getting this now. This makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, and it's great that you said battling because the first sculpture was called a cipher in Queens. And a cipher in hip-hop is when you are trying to outdo your competition. Right? You enter a cipher and you're battling your opponent with your rhymes, your lyrics, your style, your delivery, your rhyme scheme. And, that's sometimes just delivering your message off the top of your head in the freestyle. And that's what the cipher was. It was in a half circle. Each sculpture was, 3 of them formed a half circle. So when you enter the cipher, you're actually looking at them, but they're looking down at you. They wasn't looking forward; they're looking down at you. So there's some interesting. I love when you just come across these when you just come across these ideas, and it just makes you remember what your thought pattern was. So the resistance.
No, but see, if you don't understand your history, you can't move it forward. And I'm going to be honest with you. I've never been a big, rap fan because I don't like a lot of the language. I feel that for all that we have been through, I don't want to
Right.
hear all these negative connotations, particularly against women, because for a long time the women were holding up the whole race. And all of us have somebody, a mother, a grandmother, a great grandmother, that held everything up. And for you to call her these derogatory names, it's just like, I can't deal with that.
Yep.
But I understand the reasoning why you wanted to create the music. You wanted to create the music to have a voice. I just feel that we should just move it in a different direction. And I also feel that the music industry has influenced the music such that we have gone negative. And I think we need to grab hold of it,
Right.
turn it back around, and make it truly ours without all of that negativity and violence and all of that extra stuff that's not necessary.
A lot of that is poverty. A lot of it's poverty, and you know, it's the hardship. It's the stark reality of just when you don't have parents to guide you, or when your household falls apart, when the mother and father are not together, it causes a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Right. There's many African proverbs that speak about that. Right. Like, you know, if you don't take care of the kid, the village should. If you don't, then the kid will come back. And I'm just kind of paraphrasing what the meaning of some of these proverbs are. Yeah, I get you when it comes to, you know, some of the negativity, and a lot of that is a stark reality of what some of these kids are going through.
It's totally different
Yeah.
from, you know, our growing up. I'm sure we're closer in age, and it's like, it's totally different.
Yeah.
You could have been poor, but you didn't feel like you were poor.
Right.
You felt like everything was taken care of. You had your family, you had your friends, you had your neighborhood, you knew your streets.
Yeah.
And now it is totally different, you know, where there's a lot of, you know, violence, too much influence with these phones, where they don't know how to connect. Because if you really think about it, the musicians that you are kind of spotlighting, it's all about poetry. It's all about verse. It's about communicating, connecting. But yet it's not totally there. You know, people are not totally connecting, you know, where you feel inspired, where you feel you need to move. When you really start to look at the music, I think of Gil Scott-Heron. I was lucky enough to meet him before he died.
Okay.
Okay, I got to meet Gil Scott-Heron.
Yeah.
And he told me that he wanted to be called a bluesologist. I didn't even know what that meant.
Right.
And I was in college and writing for this paper, and I said, Gil Scott wants to be called a bluesologist. They're like, Savannah, what is that? I said, I don't know. But that man told me that's what he wanted to be called, then that's what we're going to call him,
Right.
a bluesologist. But that was him in verse, talking, sharing. It's the same thing. Do you see it like there's this connection between blues and jazz and hip-hop? I'm starting to see this more and more these days. And now you're bringing in the Caribbean, and I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. There's definitely that connection all the way through. It's a complete reflection of the commingling of the cultures that coexist in the areas and where the music comes from. Like, for example, the music of the Bronx and hip hop.
Bronx girl.
Go ahead, Bronx. What is it? Bronx keep on making it. Yeah. You know, and there's this different sound from the Bronx, from Brooklyn, from Queens, and you can even talk to the DJs that were the pioneering of hip hop in the Bronx versus Queens. Queens, they had homes. They had actual homes with garages that can store these large speaker boxes. So you had these gigantic speaker competitions between these DJs in Queens. I'm talking Infinity Sounds and the Disco Twins. I mean,
Gotcha.
Their sound system, you couldn't match it.
Maybe we should show some images of Biggie, because you have some images of Biggie that maybe we should show now.
Yeah, you know, it's really the environment, because in Queens, you know, you have this neighborhood called Adelaide Park, and you had just about 80 to 90% of the jazz greats at the time living in that neighborhood.
Right, like Louis Armstrong.
Louis Armstrong, you had Billie Holiday, you had
Right.
Miles Davis, you had it's a long list, and that sound reverberated throughout the community. That's when you have like a Tribe Called Quest getting influenced by jazz. You know, you have also various groups that are being influenced by the sound patterns of jazz. You had musicians that came in and did hip hop. Yeah, there's historians that know this guy by the name of T.L. Cross. He'll tell you all about that. But yeah, it's you're right. It's the mixing of jazz, blues, hip hop. You know, that each sound influencing the next generation. Now you have these computer sounds because not much is analog anymore. So a lot of the sounds is very computer generated, right? There's no echo chamber. There's just a sound. There's no
that part I don't care for so much.
You don't hear a pin drop in the studio when you're when you're listening.
Right.
You don't hear a beeper go off. Beeper, right? That's way back.
Yeah, that's
then.
very old. But no, I like sometimes hearing those sounds that you're not expecting to hear because it makes it more real. It makes it more authentic. Making it perfect. Nah, I don't want it to be perfect. I want to hear the differences and the other noises that goes on. See, now this was quite interesting. And now we got a couple minutes left, right? And I want you to talk about the piece that you want to do for Harlem Sculpture Gardens. Tell us the name of that work that you want to develop.
So the name of that piece is called Yeah, and that is a direct reference from the actual subject matter that I plan on sculpting, which is Cool DJ Red Alert, right? A Harlem DJ who helped pioneer hip-hop on the radio. When I came over to this country, he was the DJ I was listening to on the radio. He was the guy I was waiting up, at his hour to play his music and have my tape recorder to record his session, over the radio and play it back when I have time to play it on my own. So, he was on Kiss FM for a very long time.
Oh, wow, I haven't heard that in a long time. Kiss
Yeah,
FM, man.
He just celebrated 40 years on the radio. He himself is Caribbean, I believe from Antigua, and he helped to spearhead some of that reggae into the hip hop scene when it was, wasn't as Caribbean influenced then, right? So, yeah, he's a phenomenal dude. He is, he's a hip hop giant legend. And I feel like I should celebrate him in this sculptural form.
You just shared a lot of history that I think people don't even know. And I'm very impressed with that because sometimes you get put off by something and you be like, I ain't paying it no attention. I don't want to hear about it. Okay. But you actually pulled me back. I've been hearing that a lot lately. Last weekend, I organized a panel discussion where we had Sanford Biggers, Kobe Kennedy, Tashaba Lala herself. And Tashaba Lala featured Nicki Minaj on the cover of Vogue magazine. So she was all over Vogue in December. Kobe and Sanford was talking about the influence of hip-hop for them and what it meant for them. Amazing. How you could cut, dice, reassemble, because Sanford deals with collage, and what he was describing when it came to the music, because he also deals with quilts, was this sort of mashup with hip-hop. And then Kobe was talking about that influence and what it meant for him. And so you've kind of helped me rethink this to say maybe I need to pause and go back, not to be so offended by some of the lyrics and maybe pay attention to other elements because there's something there that people need to understand. And I think we don't know because also the drama that goes around hip-hop kind of takes us away from paying attention to the music. And, even the Grammys recently where one of the artists who won 3 Grammys gets arrested.
Yeah.
Okay? It's like that's too much drama when the focus should be
Yeah.
on the music. And I believe that was a setup to embarrass him on purpose. Who does that, you
Right.
know?
Right.
But I just think that sometimes when you are making a point, there are people who are there to try to drag you down.
Right.
So I'm getting a better appreciation now of
Right.
hip hop rap to see it for what it is. This
Right.
real interesting musical form that's overlays all these other types of music that I didn't
Right.
think was there.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think that you could look to other disciplines that gets a pass to be vulgar. Cinema gets a pass to be vulgar, right? Because it's because of the framing of how the story is, right? You're set up to sit down and watch it and be entertained and be taken for a ride, right? A lot of hip hop is also that. Comedy is extremely vulgar depending on the comedian,
That's
right?
correct.
You go to Eddie Murphy Roy, you can go to his influences, you know, Richard Pryor. I mean, those guys really, their mouths were on fire. And it's the same thing in hip hop. You have very conscious lyrics. You have Rakim, who never cursed in any of his music. Okay, didn't curse in his earlier music.
Okay.
Right? And still hardly don't. And his rhyme scheme is based on jazz because he grew up listening to jazz.
Wow.
Biggie Smalls also, Notorious B.I.G., he was mentored by a jazz artist in his neighborhood. And by being mentored, he picked up on how to deliver in notes and tones. When you listen to Biggie, like anyone could tell you, not anyone, but some very sensitive ears can tell you that the way how Biggie is delivering his rhymes is in a type of notes and tones similar to how a musician would play guitar, jazz.
Wow.
Yeah, so, getting past the vulgarity, if you go to West Coast hip-hop, like, Snoop and Dre, the music is incredibly complex and beautiful. You just have these spicy lyrics that if your ear is trained to really just not deal with that, then you won't get past that and hear the complex beauty that goes into making that kind of music that really showcases that area that they grew up in. So, I mean, the music isn't stimulating and followed just because it's vulgar. There's a lot more that in the content that helps make it really art.
Okay. But I think for a lot of people, they're losing that because they don't know it. And you just helped explain it in a manner. So I just want to say we're going to wrap this up, but this was such a pleasure talking to you and hearing what you're doing. And I just learned a lot about DJ Cool Alert.
Yeah, DJ Red Alert.
Okay, Red Alert. So thank you so much. Bam.